You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Does God live in a black hole? Well, today we're going to be discussing Deep Space Nine, kind of some black hole stuff, some stuff about gods and sci-fi and politics and government. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is Systematic Geekology. We are the Priest to the Geeks. I'm Joshua Noel, one of your co-hosts. I'm here with another co-host, Sarey, and Sarey is working on a movie project, which is part of why we were like, hey, let's do a bonus episode. And we were thinking about the things that we liked, and we were like, Deep Space Nine. But Sarey, you want to tell them some about your movie and all that?
Oh, sure. That'd be great. Yeah. I'm in the last few days of a crowdfunding campaign, which was very successful. It met its goal. It was supposed to be a 45-day campaign, but it met the goal of the amount of money I was raising for production in the first 16 or 17 days. So I was really blown away and encouraged by the momentum and the amount of support, and from both like people I hadn't talked to in a long time, but also like the Portland film community, the Portland wine community, people who were sharing and giving. It was really, really cool. And so I'm really excited about it. And if people still want to give, I'm not sure if this is going to go live before it ends in about 10 days. But if they still want to give, what I'm doing is I have a stretch goal for post-production. So that's a separate budget, and post-production can cost a lot of money to edit and do special effects and stuff like that. So if people still want to give, they can, or if they just want to go to the website and hit follow, they can sign up to get updates on the project. So it's just winemakermovie.com. Winemakermovie.com should forward you to our Seed and Spark page if your browser's doing what it should. The project is it's an eerie sci-fi film that takes place at a winery. So it's about this woman who owns this winery, this plot of land in rural Oregon, and she finds out, well, spoiler alert, she's actually an AWOL alien soldier who's been hiding out on Earth and discovered this love of winemaking. Huh. So the protagonist finds out that her people know where she is and they're coming for her. But she is trying to finish the year's vintage before they come and mess with her. And the film ends with a confrontation between her and her enemies at a wine tasting. And so it should be fun, and it's a proof of concept for a feature that I would like to make, a feature film. And some of my references are film like some Under the Skin, or like some Alex Garland films. I'm a big fan of Field of Dreams. It's that kind of magical realist vibe. So those are some of the references for the project. Also Arrival. Arrival's more like full on spaceships and aliens, you know. Yeah. But the tone is very much similar to that, I feel like. Just sort of that like misty vibe, you know. Oregon's very foggy. There's misty mornings, and the female protagonist, and just using those conventions to create sort of mystique and stuff. So so that's what the project's about.
Yeah. You said eerie sci-fi, so what makes it eerie?
I think I wanted to kind of have like an unnerving feeling, like the whole time you don't know when these guys are going to show up. And also I feel like the landscape of Oregon, like rural Oregon, lends itself to that. It's very wild, you know, and the type of like plant life and trees, and the way the weather can be so unpredictable. It kind of lends itself to that. And, some score.
Nice.
Some score to trip you out. You know, I've got my friend is a musician. Her name's Masa Zargaran, but her stage name for music is Omniflux, and she's a really talented musician, and she's agreed to score the film, which I'm really excited about her doing that. So
yeah, good score can make or break a movie. So
it really can.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the temptation, you don't want to overscore too. So like you use it just the right moments. It's great. You know, I think a lot of like early filmmakers overscore, you know, but you need to let the drama speak for itself sometime. So that's the scoop. Anything else?
Also, Sarey is joined by, speaking of magical, Princess Lulu. So, her kid has had a snow day. So if you hear hear some stuff in the background. That might be what it is.
Yeah, she's showing me she's put a ring on every finger of her hand. She's wearing fairy wings and a tiara right now. And even though it's snowing outside, she's wearing a pink dress covered in flamingos and watermelon. So
man, yeah, living the high life.
Living the dream life. Also,
Yeah.
I had put on Encanto for her, but she'd rather be hanging out with Mama right now.
That's a fun movie.
Oh yeah, she loves it.
Yeah. Who's not wearing a pink flamingo dress, believe it or not. We're also joined by another co-host, Joe Day. Joe, how's it going, man? What you been geeking out on?
I've been going back and watching through Psych. We try to keep
Good stuff.
an active running lighthearted show in the mix, and we finished we finished for us Brooklyn Nine-Nine. There is a part of Brooklyn Nine-Nine that it drops like hard. So we've been going back through Psych. That's been great.
Man, yeah. Brooklyn Nine-Nine's a great show too. But well, guys, I think this would be a good time to jump in and talk about Deep Space Nine. But hang in there. We're going to ask Sarey a few more questions about our movie after some Deep Nines talk. I might let Joe ask you some more about it at the end here, because that is good. Why we're doing a bonus. We want you guys to check it out. So perfect. So Joe, Deep Space Nine. We're here to talk about it. As far as things go for me, my introduction to this is kind of weird. I was told that I need to check this one out for a long time. I loved the old original Star Trek movies, had a harder time getting into Next Gen for whatever reason. It's not that I didn't like it. It's just every time I go to watch it, I'm like, this is fun. And then I just lose my place by the end of season 1 and I just give up. And I keep being told that you'll love Deep Space Nine because, I love world religion. I studied world religion in college for a while. I just think it's a fun topic. And you're like, well, this is a perfect blend. You'll love this. And I was like, okay, well, I'll get through Next Gen so I can watch that. And then, I never made it through season 1. So I just never checked Deep Space Nine out until I watched Lower Decks came out last year, the year before. I forget exactly when that started. It's a lot of fun. And they did a crossover episode with Deep Space Nine. And I was like, you know what? I got to see more of these characters. I'm just going to bite the bullet and start watching it. And I did. And I absolutely loved it. It was one of those where you watched episode 1 just to kind of check it out to see more about the characters. And before you know it, it's been days and you've done nothing. You're not sure if you've slept and you finished the show. Joe, what was your experience as far as watching Deep Space Nine? When did you find out about it and start getting into it?
So it's one that I don't think I realized when I started watching it. I didn't realize that it was as old as it was because it was just kind of a fixture of my childhood. I did not realize that it started in 93. A lot of what is contained in the series makes sense when you realize that it started then. But there's one of the beautiful things that I think about that I think exists for Star Trek in comparison to some of the other IPs that are out there. There are some aspects thematically of, there are nods in Next Gen or in TNG that if you've watched the original series, you'll understand. If you've watched both of the other series and you've watched DS9, you'll understand the nods, so on and so forth. But they're not prerequisite. So for me, it was going in kind of a blank slate because I wasn't really aware of what this was about. Just that I was told that it was different than TNG in a way that I would really appreciate. And honestly, TNG, I've got a soft spot in my heart for Picard. I think he's a strong character, all of those things. But at this point, I can definitively tell you that my favorite Star Trek series is now DS9, especially after having gone back through it recently and doing a rewatch. it's just so good. And so like I was significantly late to the party. I watched it. I was exposed to it the first time a couple of years ago, and then watched the full series in completion just recently. Like I started it a couple of months ago and binged through it.
Wow. So I think Sarey might be a little bit longer in the tooth than us on this one. Sarey, I know you're a big Star Trek fan. When did you first get introduced to Deep Space Nine? And I don't know, what's your experience with the series?
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember watching TNG like on Sunday nights with my dad sometimes from a really young age. And that is like my series because I came to it at a super young age, so it's sort of burnt into my psyche. And so when I heard they were launching another show, it was very exciting. And I remember watching it with when it was first on, it overlaps. I forget what year it started. But I remember it did not hold my interest when I was young, when it started. And I wanted to watch it because it was just more Star Trek, but it just didn't hold my interest. I was like, they're just on this space station all the time. And I think because it's a little bit more complex too. Like I probably wasn't there yet with probably with just, I don't know, like the political aspects of things and some of the different kinds of conflicts that were happening, which I know was a real, it was a departure, a conscious departure from what Gene Roddenberry's original vision was. Like he never wanted any conflict to be happening between the characters. And you see them kind of holding on to that maybe in earlier days, but from a very early stage, they start, there's conflict on the space station, because of all the, and then, so anyway, that said, I don't even think I finished, I didn't stay loyal to that show when it first aired and it was on the air, but like I did to TNG. But I started picking it up years and years later and really enjoying it a lot more than I remembered. And then when in 2020, when I was when we were in quarantine and I was on maternity leave and just figuring out how to be a mom and stuff, I binged it. Like I watched so much Deep Space Nine at that time. And I ended up getting like through the whole series and just being like, this show is the best. I felt very emotionally attached to the characters. I started finding out like what everyone was up to and stuff, and especially like the women characters are so cool on this show. Like Kira and Dax are just the best. The both of them are such cool female leadership ideals, I feel like. And so I became if there was any doubt of my DS9 fandom, it was eradicated during that period of time.
Yeah. In fact, I if I'm thinking right, didn't you choose for your avatar? Aren't you Kira on the logo and everything?
No, Dax.
Dax. Okay.
Yes, man. I'm a Trill.
I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool. Her whole like the fact that she's so down with like the Klingon culture is, I really love that about her.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot of that's really weird for me, having like spent so much of my time with my only exposure to Star Trek being the old movies. Yeah. So Klingons are like not good, like it's not okay to be friends with Klingons.
You're still not down with them, like
it's like
allies.
So it's really weird seeing them just kind of like, oh yeah, this is just part of everything now, and I'm like, what? Yeah. Why? Yeah, that's funny.
It's the undiscovered country for you. Is that would you say that?
Yeah. Well, that. But man,
that's the Star Trek 6 reference. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. The Star Trek 6 was weird. It was good, but it was weird. Yeah, no. I mean, and you hit on a few things that this show was definitely very different. The other shows, which I wonder if this is part of why I was able to attach a little bit better. A lot of the original Star Treks through Next Gen is like this utopia in the future. The government's figured it out, and we're kind of seeing what a positive view of government could look like. And then here we go, and it's like, okay, well, what if it's not perfect? What if it is flawed? What if we don't see them going place to place and they're stuck in one spot? And, a lot of different things are thrown at this. And for me, I love political thriller. That is like, that's my jam. And it's not quite there, but it definitely has some hints of that in some of the episodes where you're like, okay, all right, we're getting some interesting politics stuff going on here.
It's
Totally. And it's all mixed up with the religious culture too of
Oh man,
Azure. So,
yeah, which is
which
super
is like
my
politics
jam.
and religion. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
And that's the part that stuck out to me. You know, I'm not necessarily a huge I don't necessarily vibe with high politics in my media, but I didn't like, yes, obviously there are political elements that are there, but that's not really what stood out to me. It was reconciling the idea of what does it mean to have a bunch of imperfect people together, and when you add like spiritual practices and what that actually looks like. It's one of the rare times for me that I can appreciate the fact that they went a more realistic route with it. I'm going to say something that some is going to be offensive to some Star Trek fans. I think the exit, and this is a little dicey to say because his exit was tied to his medical condition. So I'm not, don't read what I'm not saying here. But I think one of the best things that could have happened to Star Trek is that Gene Roddenberry not be involved in it anymore, because he was so tied to what he wanted to see. And honestly, that's really what like I said, Picard, he has a special place in my heart. You know, LaForge, Worf, you know, so on and so forth. There's so many characters that I absolutely love that are within TNG, but there's so much of that is so, to me, like, it's not, I don't need realism, but it's not so much about the realistic aspect of it as it is, it's so clearly the transplant of one man's vision versus something that's more of a cohesive story and a bigger environment and all of that kind of stuff, that like these things don't exist outside of just what Gene Roddenberry saw. You know what I mean? Like, you look at there's a famous scene from TNG where Picard goes on this big monologue about how civilization has moved past the time of superstition, and you'd ask me to take them back to that sort of thinking. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not even like, I'm not the type that's going to get up in my feels when a secular show doesn't play to spiritual beliefs. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to get offended by that. But like, that to me doesn't scream like, what if the world moved away from religion? That's a guy that has a vendetta against showing religion in a TV show. And so, no, we want to play heavy-handed towards that. And so I think when you add all of these underpinnings back into it, for me, it was that religious side of trying to marry the worlds of this man that is a commander who already in episode 1 is showing more emotion than Picard showed for the first several seasons of TNG. And how do you couple that with being looked upon as being this religious figure and prophet for an entire group of people that are understanding something from that most of us would look at from a scientific standpoint, and they're like, no, it's religious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny. Captain Sisko is definitely my captain because he didn't want to be a prophet or any of that other stuff. He just, all this stuff got thrown on him. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What you're talking about with the show doing better as a whole, the universe of Star Trek, because of Gene Roddenberry leaving, I see it. When you go through a lot of like major empires or even religions, it usually hinges on how well did the first leader leave it. Christianity, if Jesus did not leave it to the disciples as well as he did, religion wouldn't continue. Luckily, Jesus is God, so he did that very well, you know. But you know, when you look at even Islam, there was some shaky things, and you still see how that was passed out in a split in the religion, and both leaders were able to do something with it, but that split still exists. old American history, colonial. Like, I love colonial American history for whatever reason. The way George Washington left, say what you want about the guy, he wasn't perfect by any means, but he did leave in a good way that allowed the country to continue and prosper. Whereas if he would have kept trying to hold on, who knows what would have happened. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a good point. And when I'm looking at Star Wars, that makes me a little bit nervous because I'm not sure how great George Lucas left it to the next people. We'll see. I do like Mando, but we'll see. Getting back to this show, though, Deep Space Nine, where I guess if someone hasn't seen it yet, they're Star Trek lovers or curious. As far as things go, where does this show take place in the like overall timeline? Could one of you guys kind of explain that? I know it has something to do with Next Gen, and then I know what shows happen after it, but where exactly in the timeline does it fall?
I can start this part of the conversation, then Sarey, if you want to add the seasoning, if I miss anything. So the series picks up with a flashback to the Battle of Wolf 359. I think is the name of the battle. It's the big battle with the Borg. And so it's kind of taking place slightly overlapped with TNG, because you see at the very beginning, Captain Sisko has a conversation with Picard, and TNG was at least a generation after the motion picture. They had already gone off and were doing they had already basically retired the original crew by the time TNG took place. So I'm not sure once you get outside of those first three, because I know that there are prequel series for Star Trek that take place before the original crew, but it takes place at least a generation or two after what most people consider as the start of the series, even though chronologically that's not actually the start of the series. It's just the start of when things were actually being produced with Shatner and all of that.
Yeah. Star Trek and Star Wars both try really hard to compete for who can be the most confusing chronologically. One of the newest Star Trek shows I love is Strange New Worlds, and my understanding is it might be the earliest one. I know it's before the original series. Just weird.
I think Enterprise is still
Sarey,
the earliest one, I think.
See, I haven't even heard of that one.
That's the Scott Bakula one.
Yeah.
Huh.
Bakula, he's the captain.
Huh.
And it's like just beyond like our time. It's like they're like a step beyond just our kind of astronauts, you know?
I'm gonna have to watch that one next then. Okay then. Sarey, other than that, was he on point with everything?
Yeah, I mean, isn't Captain Picard on the first episode too? Like they meet in the first episode?
Yeah.
And they have kind of an uncomfortable moment because, you know, his wife was killed by the Borg while Picard was like giving them intel because he was assimilated, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this show started in like the 5th season, I think. 5th or 6th season of TNG. Okay. And so I think the assumption is they're happening concurrently in the world of.
So yeah, that's what I was most unsure about, is if it was like after or at the same time.
So
I know that conversation was really uncomfortable though. And it was fun because Captain Sisko just wanted nothing to do with Patrick, which, you know, the show took a wild turn from that one. So kind of makes sense. Joe? That
there's a point in the series, partway through the series, where you can tell that there's more. They do a lot more with the scenes and the sets and all of that kind of stuff, namely because that's when TNG ended and they switched over to doing the movies. And so they broke down the set and they were able to repurpose parts of the set for DS9. And fun facts, they were actually going to they were going to go a different direction with DS9 with some of the naming conventions and all of that, but they had already started working on the ideas for Voyager, which is the next series after DS9. Yeah, I think I personally, for me, the most interesting part of TNG is the parts with the Borg. Like I think that there was such an opportunity to really expand upon them, upon the Borg. And from what I understand in other series I haven't seen, they do a lot more with the Borg. But it felt like to me, and I'll get you guys' opinion on this, it felt like it was finally somebody stepping forward and calling out Picard for what he did as a member of the Borg. Like, it just felt like in TNG, we all kind of moved past it. It was all like, oh, okay, so this battle's done, and now we're going to move on back to perfect civilization, and nobody fights, and nobody calls anybody on their stuff. And I mean, this dude was assimilated and responsible for murdering a whole boatload of people, and we're just going to leave that alone. You know what I mean? And it just felt like finally somebody calling him out. You know what I mean?
Wow. I learned a lot. I didn't really I know of the Borg. I've seen them in other Star Trek things, but I haven't seen that part of Next Gen. So I feel like my opinion's not super valuable on that one.
Yeah, well, like there is a little bit of like how guilty should he feel on TNG. Like there's an episode called Home where he goes and he breaks down crying at one point because he goes home to visit his brother and they have this fight and then he starts crying about it and stuff. Because it's like, you know, he was assimilated. He was part of the Borg, and the assumption is that he couldn't do anything about like the information that he was sharing with them involuntarily. But you know, the people who were victims or who lost loved ones in those battles are like, well, couldn't you have done something? You know, like they're not fully buying it, you know, or they need a scapegoat for their pain and stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that gets explored. There were a few fun crossovers. Well, you know, like Colmini, thank God, gets to shine. Sorry, his name is pronounced Colmini, who's you know, chief engineer at DS9. It was really fun. He's just like operating the transporter pad, you know, at TNG, but he gets to be a main character on Deep Space Nine, and he's just so beloved and gets tortured mercilessly on this. It's an internet meme now. Because all the worst stuff happens to this character, to Chief O'Brien. And then there's like an episode of TNG where Commander Riker they find out there's a duplicate of him that was created through a transporter accident. And it's this guy, and he ends up taking the name Thomas Riker. And joining this like terrorist group, the Maquis, eventually. And anyway, there's an episode where at DS9 they think Commander Riker's visiting, but it turns out to be Thomas Riker. It's like a total evil twin, you know. That's a lot of fun. And then Worf joins the cast of Deep Space Nine, which I think is great. Like I thought it was super fun. I loved his relationship with Dax and stuff. Like I thought that was great. So. I think they did a really good job with the points. It wasn't cheesy. Like it wasn't like, oh, we need TNG to make this show go. It had its own energy, but then they drew on the connection to TNG and really, I think, ways that really supported what they were trying to do.
Yeah, it was funny because I had none of the feelings about TNG when these characters came on. Like some of them I recognized, but I was like, cool, and they all felt. I felt like they were. You didn't have to watch TNG to get it, but you could tell that it was coming from somewhere else, if that makes sense. But they still kind of explained it enough that you knew what was going on. Yeah. Speaking, you know, we talk about some of the characters that passed over from there, some of the other characters that we liked. As far as like, so the premise of this show, which we touched on earlier, is they're kind of on one ship. So this black hole kind of thing exists. There's some kind of weird energy, and they're kind of monitoring a planet as well as the black hole, and sort of a civil war thing, and then eventually religious wars kind of get involved. But they're there, if I'm understanding right, they're there because of that black hole and some of the stuff that's attached to it, right?
I can't remember, but I think on the first episode they find out that they have a stable wormhole. Like it's a wormhole that takes you to another place, but you can stably get from point A to point B, which is a very far away, the Delta Quadrant, right? Is that right?
Yeah. You
can get to the Delta Quadrant in like seconds, and you can get back. So it's like a big deal. And the fact that it's in Bajoran territory is also a big deal. But I feel like they don't know that. Maybe they know it's there, but they don't know it's stable. Or don't the entities that live in the wormhole grant them passage, basically, like make it stable, because of Sisko or something like that. Sorry, I should have this
Yeah, it's
mythology.
it's a little confusing, honestly, throughout the series. I feel like they handle it different ways. But yeah, the first episode, it was interesting because he does end up in the wormhole and they're kind of studying it, I think. And basically, he has a conversation with these entities, and that's why the people decided he's a prophet, because those are their gods or something. So
Yeah, that's
pretty wild.
Yeah, they didn't know that. They didn't set out with the knowledge that the wormhole was going to be stable. And so this wormhole pops up, and Sisko is kind of something like kidnapped, I guess, but by the entities that essentially they look to as gods. And so they're studying him, trying to make heads or tails of what time means and all of that kind of stuff to humans, because they live outside of time, and they basically could have like eradicated him and not let him pass through the wormhole. And so they let him go. And so then because of that, there are all of these prophecies that the Bajoran people have, that now they look to Sisko as being the fulfillment of the prophecies.
Yeah, which creates some interesting storylines, cross lines, whatever, between I want to say Enterprise, but it's not Enterprise, between the Starfleet people and the Bajoran people, because they're kind of just now being introduced to Starfleet, if I'm remembering right. Again, there's a lot that goes on in this show.
They're not just being introduced, but I think they're trying to join. They're trying to become members. Yeah.
Yeah, they had just come off of a major war, and so they're like,
and being occupied and terrorized by the Cardassians.
By the Cardassians, yeah.
Yeah. Which still, that, just like any war, it's not like, it's officially over and that's it. There's still some byproducts that kind of come throughout the series.
The space station is a Cardassian space station. They're like, the Bajorans ended up with it once the Cardassians agreed to leave and stop occupying it. They're like, oh, we've got a Cardassian space station now. And so that's why the Federation came in, to try to facilitate that transfer of the station.
Yeah.
And that's why his first officer is a Bajoran.
Yeah, that's a good political move. One of my favorite jokes on Lower Deck is they go and they visit the space station at Deep Space Nine. I forget what it's called, but so the intro Deep Space Nine, they like circle the station a few times. It's all like slow and dramatic. So Deep Space Nine, they pull up and they're like buying for time for whatever reason. Like, well, let's just circle it a few times, really dramatically. It was great. I was like, this is beautiful. And they played the music and everything. Yeah, I was like, amazing. It was fantastic. So I think what really sells the show to me, other than I love the political thriller, I love the religious beats, but also I want to say this a lot. I'm a big character guy. You give me good characters, I'm there for it. Captain Sisko, amazing. Joe mentioned it earlier, but in the first episode, he shows more emotional depth than any of the other captains I've seen in any Star Trek, actually. And I'm like, man, guy is just great. I don't know if it's just the actor or how they wrote the character or what. Absolutely fantastic. And also, I know you mentioned a few of the other female characters and stuff too. I think my favorite, though, might be Quark. I love Quark. He is just one of the absolute funniest, characters. I'm like, what? He just doesn't need to be there, really, until he does. He becomes important to the story later on. But the first little bit, I'm like, this guy's just obnoxious, and I love it.
Yeah, and by a few seasons in, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much I care about this annoying little Ferengi.
Right.
I care about him so much. Yeah.
And it's
but yeah, he's not my favorite.
On that note, you have this series that is taking the time and attention to make callbacks. You know what I mean? Like you look at the characters of the Ferengi, and they were showcased in, I think, for the first time in TNG, and then you have some of the Klingons that show up throughout the series, those are established Klingons from previous series, and so on and so forth. Like there's depth to the world that they're building out. And so far from what I've seen, I'll lay that caveat, that out of what I've seen from Star Trek, this is the best showing of creating the world. Part of creating the world, I agree 100%, is part of the is partly characters, but also is it moving? Is it vibrant? Are there things happening outside of just what the camera's shooting? And that, to me, is one of the strongest parts of this series. Is it just feels like there's always something happening even off from the camera. You know what I mean? Like you look at somebody like Dax. Fun facts. LeVar Burton, Geordie LaForge, came to guest direct partway through the series. It was, I think, season 3 or 4 when he directed an episode, and he affectionately called her Action Barbie, and it was a nickname that she leaned into. She appreciated, because she married those worlds of not just being a damsel in distress. You think, early 90s to mid 90s, women weren't necessarily given roles and agency to be able to really show a depth of range, or let alone be in physical altercations with men in a way that depicted them in a way where it was competent or like keeping up or things like that. And then you have that aspect with that range of character that she also brought into it, that just, it's a far cry from the days of women being used on Star Trek as plot devices or as people to be looked upon rather than like engaged with. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like for the first time honestly, I'm not sure I can point to a woman on the show where this doesn't, at least shades of this isn't true for, like that the full range of agency is given to everybody in a way that allows for a stronger overall world and experience.
Well, to marry what you were talking about and what I was talking about, I'm brought to think of a time where Quark has a crush. And it's really interesting because the Ferengi people do not value women. And yet he is like, I actually think maybe I do value her, but he's like, I don't know if I have the right to in my culture, which that also gets really dicey when you think about how a lot of people take the Ferengi race as kind of a commentary on Jewish people at the time. And it's kind of like, that wasn't okay that they did that. But also, it was a different time. But I don't know. I liked the character, and I like that even if maybe they were doing some dicey stuff like that we would not be okay with today, they were still giving honor to the people in their own way, if that makes sense. And I don't know. I liked I like what you were talking about with how they gave everybody agency, and how Quark, I feel like, was the only one that we see of the Ferengi. Maybe was it his kid or his nephew who's kind of also learning other people other than the Ferengi have value?
It's his nephew.
Throughout the series.
His brother Nog and his nephew, they all become pretty important characters. And there's a really great episode with their mother. Because they take it
I forgot about that,
They take it to the extreme with the Ferengi culture. Women aren't even allowed to wear clothes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, it's funny, but it's also kind of dark when you think about it.
Yeah.
And so like they find out that and women aren't allowed to be involved in business, and which is what their whole culture is about. So I think it's just like, in Deep Space Nine, they're doing like an exaggerated commentary on how it actually used to be, like women not being able to own property isn't that far in the rearview window in real life.
Right.
So, and like they find out that their mom is like doing business and wearing clothes. And it's like, they're really embarrassed. They're really embarrassed that she's like going this direction. And ultimately they accept it,
I remember that episode made me fundamentally uncomfortable watching it, because like it just the way that they played it, it was a deep cut, like because like you said, there are certain aspects, like we can't point to a time where women weren't allowed to wear clothing, but we can point to a time where you look at, if I'm correct, Sarey, I think you're a smidge older than Josh and I think I'm in the middle, and then Josh is the youngest out of us. But so in my lifetime, I can point to times where, like, I'm in business, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I can point to a time where a woman in business, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a CEO or whatever, even in the C-suite, doesn't even have to be the owner, wasn't taken seriously. And like those kinds of things, like buying land, all of that, we have been aware of that change in dynamic as a humanity, that that coupled with just the way that the actor that plays Quark commits to the bit so much, and the way that it's written goes to such a degree that, like, no, we're gonna make you sit in this. This is uncomfortable. This should make your skin crawl, and we're gonna make you sit in it.
He is so committed to that role. He's a phenomenal character actor. God, what's his name? Armin Shimmerman.
Yeah, and I'm really glad they brought him back to do the voice in the crossover with Lower Decks too. That was great. But yeah, no, all of that episode kind of reminds me of like Modest Proposal. You know, where it's like, hey, we have too many people. People are starving. Perfect solution. Let's just eat the babies. You know, it's like that kind of satire where it's like your skin crawls and you're like, oh yeah, some of our answers are actually terrible, maybe. And I think that's something sci-fi is really good at doing, because you could do it in a way that isn't just mocking people, but you're bringing them into a different world and showing them what this logic looks like to the extreme.
Right. Well, I mean, we still have people policing what women should and shouldn't wear. And, you know, and it's not too far, you know, in business, you know, in just the last 10 years, you know, people telling me like, you should wear a skirt when we go to a meeting or something like that. Or people I know who have been involved in ministry, like being told, oh, you should wear a dress. Oh no, that's too revealing, or that's too sexy. You should wear, you know, like literally your body, like how much is too much? You got to be feminine, but you can't be too attractive, you know, like finding this perfect. And it's like, okay, come on. At this point, it's not my problem, you know? But like, so yeah. So maybe like, not like Joe said, like you can't point to be like, it's just an exaggeration of what the existing thing is. And that's why sci-fi is so fun, because you can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's interesting that this show does touch so much on religion, is because I think, I'll speak for myself here. In my perspective, the church as a whole seems like it's like 20 years behind the rest of the world in empowering women. And there are some theological things with people who believe different things about women playing the role of priest, but it doesn't stop there. So I'm okay disagreeing about theology, but then when you get to this point of like, we're also, the only job you're allowed to do is teach children, or, you know, you have to dress a certain way, or, you know, I've actually attended a church once where the pastor was saying that you shouldn't work for a place if a woman's your manager. And I'm like, that is stupid. Yeah. Like, that's just downright dumb.
Yeah, I've made the mistake of poking my head into the Twitterverse. I've made it a point to like stay away from that cesspool for a long time for a very specific reason. And I just so happened to poke my head back in when everything was jumping off with Saddleback Church and yada, yada, yada. And so that's kind of the soup du jour right now within Christian conversation on the platform. And like, regardless, right? You can have the conversations about secondary, for anybody who didn't catch that, secondary points, like, you know, women in leadership, women in ministry, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, fine, whatever. Have that conversation. But that's not like you said, Josh, that's not what's actually like happening. It's all the underlying conversation that is the disgusting part. And all of that kind of stuff. If it was as simple as educated conversation, then that would be one thing. There's nothing educated about it, and there's no conversation. And so having a show like this that, you know, you take all of these things in the year of our Dark Lord 2023, you're still talking about this crap. And like, I'm still as a pastor, as a husband, as a brother, as an uncle, like, I need to have articulate conversations with people when some of these people are products of church hurt. And then you rewind the clock and realize that this show that we're talking about, this science fiction gimmick that we're talking about, that's daring to push boundaries and have these conversations and all of that kind of stuff. Like, we're talking somewhere in the ball. I can't remember exactly what season it's in. I know it's pretty early on, so I would guess somewhere between, because I know the series, or at least I'm pretty confident that the series started in 93. So you're talking about somewhere in the ballpark of 93 to 95 that this conversation's taking place.
Yeah.
And just about 20 years later, we're still having a conversation about that. We still haven't really, like, we have made progress. We have made steps forward where, like, oh, I don't know, somebody's evaluated by, like, I don't know how qualified they are, intelligent they are, all of those kinds of things. But we still have to deal with a whole crop of people that's not how they see it. Like, that's telling. And like you guys said, for me, not to like totally derail it into like modern issues, but that's the beauty. Yeah, I'll go with that word of science fiction, that it pushes and prods and all of that kind of stuff, even into spiritual matters, and how you square the circle of talking about science and talking about religion and all of those different things.
Yeah. To put it to put the conversation in the hands of the woman of this panel.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, Sarey, how do you have any ideas? Like, how does the church catch up to sci-fi from 30 years ago?
Great. Yeah, if I can answer that question, there's other things we're behind on too, you know. So, let me just like look into let me just have a second with that question. Well, I think a lot of the problem with a lot of stuff like this is a failure of imagination, because it can be very difficult for someone who hasn't, like, if someone feels, for example, if a man feels like yourselves feels a call to ministry, a call to teach, you know, or experiences that and feels very strongly, you know, if someone hasn't had to experience to be like, oh no, but my body restricts me, that sucks. If you haven't like experienced that, it's hard to hear from someone else that it could be that bad, you know? You have to be able to imagine, like, step in someone's shoes, but that's a cliche statement. Like, expand your imagination around what it could feel like to be limited and to feel less free or less respected or less thought of as less than in any way because of the kind of body you have. So if someone is telling you about their experience, just believe them, and don't just believe them, but like try to use your imagination to think about what that could be like, could what that experience could be like, to help your own sense of understanding and to just feel more connected with the human race. So that's all I have to say is, like, church, use your imagination and listen to people, and don't be so top down about everything. And to connect it back to the show, Deep Space Nine does some good. Beyond the Stars is an episode that deals with race in a really powerful way. And that episode is broadly thought of as one of the best episodes of the whole series, to where the DS9 universe becomes a work of fiction written by a science fiction writer in the, I don't know, 40s. I don't know what decade it's supposed to be. But he's an African American author, and he's not allowed to publish, or they'll publish him, but they'll make him use a different name and stuff. And the episode's great because it doesn't have a happy ending. It ends with like hope, but it doesn't tie it up like to make you feel better. It's like makes you sit in this feeling of discrimination and unresolved desire for a more equitable universe, you know? And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate that about that show. It doesn't tie it up in a bow like, you know, like maybe Gene Roddenberry then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
leaves you with that tension in the end, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, one of our other co-hosts and I were recently talking about it. Christian, he hates ambiguity. I love open-ended endings. Like I think they're the best because then it's like I'm sitting here getting to wrestle with the question and think it through, and that's just fun for me. Which also, hey, I hope I didn't sound like, hey, the church is mistreating people. How do you answer? You know, I didn't mean to put that on you for it.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I think that's unfortunately, I think that's another problem. Like we tend to either blame women or then we turn around and expect women to come up with the answers for how we're treating women. And it's like, well, that's our problem, right? Like we did it.
Right. And of course, I also can't answer from the perspective of all women. That would be impossible.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
But as a woman, I can answer how, for me, what I feel like is important. Yeah, and I don't know. I want to do better at taking a posture of listening. So that's all I was trying to do. No, you're fine.
It's all wild. But getting back to the show, because honestly, we could sit on that for all day. Yeah. We could probably sit on Deep Space Nine for all day. But
we could do it real quick. I would just like to say real quick that my favorite character is Odo.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah, if you had a favorite character, and you know that's funny. Because why I like Quark so much is because of his relationship with Odo. Like those two together, their chemistry is fantastic.
Different sides of the same coin. Like their chemistry is really a big strength of the show. But yeah, I love Odo. He's so grumpy but so complex. And you know, kind of in the way that Picard, like very like suppressed emotions, but you know there's so much there. There's like pain and there's like feeling like an outsider all the time. And that's I'm always drawn to those like outsider characters who struggle with that sense of belonging. And also the whole storyline where you know he's deeply in love with Kira. And and they're just like buddies. And there's an episode where it's a time travel episode. They go to a planet where they find
that is fun.
Do you know that episode?
Yeah.
Odo's there. So it's basically like they find a planet where a version of themselves, this is when eventually Deep Space Nine, they get the Defiant. They get a ship that is basically parked at the space station and goes places so they can explore the Delta Quadrant a little bit and stuff. They find a planet where there was a time travel accident where a version of themselves got sent back a few hundred years in time, and that group of people populated the planet. So they meet a bunch of their own descendants.
That's funny.
However, Odo's there, and he hasn't aged because he's a shapeshifter. I mean, he hasn't he's still alive. And he's evolved sort of emotionally, and that's when Kira finds out kind of that he's in love with her. And I just love that episode. It's one of my favorite episodes. It's so beautiful and interesting.
Yeah, I always found it really interesting that he had a crush, because like for the longest time I just kind of read him as grumpy Spock, more or less, like obviously not Vulcan, but you know he had that kind of vibe of like the outsider, the not really emotional whatever, and I was like, what do you mean you have like how's that?
But like in love with her.
And
this unrequited love, you know, it's so interesting.
And it's just and the fact that he was so complex, and Quark also, you know, with the different crushes and different stuff that he had, and how he felt his relationship with the rest of the Ferengi changing, and then how they related to each other as like kind of like reluctant friends by like mid to the end of the thing. It was so funny how they like were there for each other but not like directly there for each other. I was like,
because he's like a cop and Quark's like a criminal, like that's there's
Quark
an episode too where they get
actively trying
break the law constantly. And there's an episode where Odo and Quark get stranded on a planet together, and you're like, oh, you guys love each other. Like it's obvious.
God, it's just so funny.
It's actually a bromance.
Well, Which is also why it was so like it was so much fun for me, because I had to rewatch the episode of Lower Decks when they interact with them, and the fact that like it's been all this time and Quark is still just scamming people. I'm like I love it. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, but somehow like actually never ends up in jail. He just
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
Quark, you know.
It's Quark. He does stuff like that. Yeah.
With that, then, I hope we could do more Deep Space Nine conversations in the future. I love this show. This was just kind of a getting our toes wet, introducing everybody to it. But we're going to wrap up, and instead of doing recommendations, I'm going to throw it to you again, talking about your upcoming film project. How does an alien get interested in winemaking? How's that a thing?
Oh, you
Do I have
think
to
I
hold off
haven't
on that?
thought about this? No. You're going to get the backstory that might not even make it in the movie, but, I'll just share
Ooh,
with
fun.
the actor or whatever, or it might be part of the feature film, So I have this backstory in mind that the race of aliens that my protagonist is from, they have colonized like a dead moon because their own planet got so busted by, it's like they're ahead of us with like messing up their planet. So they've colonized a dead moon and they live completely like relying on technology, indoor structures and stuff. But when Joni, who's the protagonist, she comes to Earth to hide out, and she realizes that because our planet is more lush and there's nature and she's in Oregon or whatever, that she has a connection she can kind of communicate with the microbiome of our planet.
That's fun.
And so she didn't know that because she wasn't surrounded by like a healthy microbiome on her dead moon planet.
Yeah.
So what winemaking and natural winemaking especially is keen on is being really connected to nature. And they, a lot of winemakers say that like 80% of winemaking, it happens on the vine. Like if you don't have good grapes, you can't make good wine really. And so her character finds that this vocation suits her well because it connects her to nature in such a way that it's a mixture of art and science. And it also makes her feel less lonely as the only, she's on her own. She's AWOL. She's got a couple human friends, but she feels less lonely when she's connected to nature and she can communicate with the consciousness of the earth, the consciousness of the plant life and the vines.
Fascinating. Yeah. So last of her race loves our earth. Kind of has a little bit of a Doctor Who vibe for me there. That's fun. That's fun.
I guess you can look at it that way.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Is there any other like teasers or anything you want to throw to them before we end this? Or
well, I launched at the same time I launched my crowdfunding campaign. I launched a podcast, and I put out the 6th episode of my own podcast today. And on that podcast, I talk about I talk about the creative process, my own creative process. What helps cultivate creativity in my life, also some practical stuff like that I do to try to like keep up with a creative practice and balance it with family and a day job. And then I interview other creatives, other filmmakers, musicians, and talk to them about their creative vocations and with a special eye towards how that intersects with mental health and spirituality, spiritual health. It's not distinctly a Christian podcast or anything. We just talk about spirituality more broadly, mental health, and things of that nature. And the show's called Secret Art Project. And I did that because I wanted to start, not just launch a crowdfunding campaign for one short film, but I wanted to start defining for myself what my values are in my art, kind of as a brand, to use that kind of cheesy word, but like what themes am I all about? What kind of creator do I want to be, and how do I start communicating about that with people, So yeah, Secret Art Project is my own personal podcast if people want to check that out too, if that's up your alley.
Oh yeah. And I'll put that link down below, as well as the website, which one more time is winemakermovie.com will take you to the movie, and then secretartproject.com will take you to my general website,
links to my more about me, my bio, the podcast, all of that stuff is there too.
Yeah. And all of that in the show notes. It'll be there for you guys. So make sure you check it all out. Sarey, thank you so much again for joining us.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about these things and to talk about Deep Space Nine, because I love it, and obviously I get to talk about it for a very long time.
Yeah, clearly with this much background in sci-fi, everyone should be super excited for what you're putting out in the world as well. So that's really cool. And
Thanks.
guys, listeners, thank you for sticking with us on this kind of bonus episode, and make sure you go to our website, systematicgeekology.org, to see more from us. And remember that we're all a chosen people, the geekdom of Priest.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.